Stranger Things has some super wild powers. From moving objects with one's mind to opening gates between dimensions, we're about to go through them all. The best place to start is with telekinesis, because it forms the backbone of the series' psychic system, and it's what viewers see most often. 11 moves objects, creatures, and people with pure will, and the strength scales with the intensity of her emotions. That's why early uses are small and precise, while later moments push into heavy lifts and violent impacts when anger or fear spikes. Telekinesis freezes bullies in a school hallway, hurls a demodog off its feet, flips a speeding Hawkins power and light van into the air, and drags a railcar along its track. The ability is reliable but draining, and excessive use leaves her physically taxed, which is one reason control training and sensory deprivation sessions became so central to her development. However, in the first few episodes of Season 5, we see this training evolve into something much more militaristic. 11 is sprinting through the woods in tactical training exercises with Hopper, using her powers to trip soldiers and manipulate the environment to beat a stopwatch time of 12 minutes and 33 seconds. We see her power usage becoming sharper, integrated with physical combat survival skills. The show frames this as innate potential sharpened by experimentation, not a simple gadget or spell, and that distinction matters for how every other ability connects back to thought, focus, and stress. But we've also learned that this telekinesis has a hard counter. We are introduced to a new villain, Dr. K, and her military operations at the Mac Z, who utilize a kryptonite against 11. This isn't a green rock, but a specific frequency of sound waves produced by machines that renders 11 completely helpless, causing her nose to bleed and preventing her from focusing enough to use her powers. This is a massive game changer, because it means telekinesis isn't an I win button anymore. It can be jammed just like a radio signal. Closely linked to telekinesis is the power to open, widen, and close the interdimensional rifts known as gates. Gatework sits at the intersection of force and focus. In 1979, a surge in conflict with Number 1 tears open a temporary gate inside the lab, and years later, contact with a predatory creature across a psychic distance triggers the so-called Mother Gate beneath Hawkins. Those moments show two sides of the same coin. One, a blast of power under pressure, the other a connection that collapses distance until the barrier gives way. 11 later demonstrates control in the opposite direction by closing the lab's gate through sustained effort rather than emotional shock. Even survival moments lean on the same mechanism, like taking a raw tear the Demogorgon created and forcing it wider to escape. The series never treats this as casual or harmless, and that caution becomes a theme because gates are rarely singular events. They introduce pressure, spores, hunters, and the possibility that something with intelligence can start using them too. Season 5 completely blows the lid off what we know about gates. First off, we see the military conducting burns, where they use flamethrowers to clear the vines and organic matter choking the gates to transport supplies. But more importantly, we learn about the terrifying peanut butter bopper theory from Steve Harrington. While driving a BMW away from a Demogorgon at a barn, Steve theorizes that the boundary between worlds is crunchy on the outside but soft on the inside, like the treat. He proves that with enough speed and force, literally driving a car at max speed, you can punch a temporary hole or gate right through the fabric of reality, transitioning from the right side up to the upside down without a pre-existing psychic tear. Even more disturbing is how Vecna is now using gate creation. It's no longer just about psychic kills opening a rift. He is using children as spires. Will reveals a vision where Holly Wheeler was attached to a spire, becoming part of the organic architecture of the Upside Down. We learn that Vecna is escalating his plan, moving from taking just Holly to targeting groups of children, specifically 12 of them, to create a massive geometric structure of gates to reshape the world. Centered around the practice the characters simply call the Void. Sensory deprivation and white noise strip away distraction until the mind projects into a dark mental plane where distance, walls, and even dimensions stop mattering. In that state, a trained subject can hear conversations, locate missing people, or even reach for living minds across the world. Early missions to spy on a foreign agent prove the practical side, but the most powerful uses are personal, like finding Will in the other world by locking onto his presence. The Void isn't just a map, it's more like a psychic theater that answers the question of where someone truly is by placing the subject there. Later in the story, that principle scales into what the group calls piggybacking, where the mind rides a connection into another person's mental space to fight an enemy without moving the body an inch. This concept gets a massive upgrade with what Robin calls the antenna theory. She posits that Will Byers is essentially a human receiver. Because he was connected to the Mind Flayer previously, he has an antenna that picks up the signal whenever Vecna or the hive mind is close. This turns the Void concept inside out. Instead of Will going to a sensory deprivation tank to see out, the signal comes to him. We see this when Will goes into a trance in the woods and sees the mandala of stones, which allows him to see exactly what Holly is seeing in real time. He is hijacking Vecna's own connection to see through the eyes of the monsters and the victims. This power allows the group to identify Derek Turnbow as the next victim, because Will literally sees through Derek's eyes while Derek is being bullied. Psychic projection is the natural extension of that idea. It's not only about seeing and listening. Projection presses into influence, confrontation, and rescue over distance. When the group splits across states, the solution isn't a road trip. It's a projection directly into Max's mind at the exact moment she is being hunted. That tactic turns a passive spying tool into a battleground. The mind becomes a room with doors that can be forced open or barricaded, and the power becomes less about looking around and more about shaping outcomes in someone else's mental landscape. That's how a hero can grab a monster that isn't standing in any ordinary room, suspend it, and break its hold on a target without so much as touching the real world. In practice, projection is the bridge that lets the show hold climaxes in multiple places at once while still enforcing the principle that every victory costs something, because long projections take time and effort and leave the body extremely vulnerable. In Season 5, we learn exactly what happened to Max regarding this power. She reveals to Holly that she is trapped inside Vecna's mind, which she describes as a nightmare prison world. But she has carved out a projection of her own, a sanctuary cave. She explains the rules of this mental projection world using the book A Wrinkle in Time and the Planet Camazotz. In this psychic space, there are 3 doors. Take your own life, accept your fate, or escape. Max managed to manifest Door 3 by using the memory of music, specifically Kate Bush, to navigate the maze of Henry's memories. This proves that psychic projection can create stable, safe houses within a hostile mind if the user has a strong enough emotional anchor. Biokinesis sits deeper in the catalog and appears more rarely. When the Demogorgon disintegrates under a final push, the effect isn't simply an impact but matter being unmade. Biokinesis also surfaces in the grimmest and most human test, restarting a stopped heart after a brutal psychic attack. It doesn't erase injuries or undo trauma, and it doesn't reverse the cause. It's a narrow window of physical intervention through a psychic channel. Those moments prove that the line between moving objects and affecting bodies is thinner than it first appears, and the power is defined not by how often it's used, but by how precisely it can alter a living state under insane pressure. Now, illusory perception belongs to Kali, or 8, and it widens the spectrum beyond pure force. Rather than throw, choke, or break, this power convinces the brain to see what isn't there. Sentinels become tigers, walls appear suddenly, gun barrels vanish, and squad cars seem to block roads that are actually open. The trick isn't just a shallow performance either. Targets feel the heat of fire that doesn't exist and hear footsteps never taken, which shows that the illusions wrap every sense the mind expects to receive, overwhelming it until it feels undeniably wrong. This sits apart from telekinesis in both cause and cure. A door that isn't real cannot be smashed open. It must be disbelieved or outflanked, which is why Kali's skill set turns small crews into ghosts and why line of sight with a psychic matters more than body armor and raw firepower. However, Season 5 shows us that Vecna has mastered this ability to a terrifying degree. He uses illusions for grooming and manipulation. We find out that the mysterious Mr. Whatsit that Holly was talking to is actually Henry Creel in a human disguise. He appears to her as a kind, handsome man in a vest and hat, checking a pocket watch, completely hiding his rot and scars. He creates an illusion of the Creel house that is pristine, sunny, and beautiful, a Victorian dream home to lure Holly in. He uses this power to build trust, offering gifts like a Tiffany cassette tape, effectively weaponizing kindness as an illusion. Remote viewing shows up across multiple subjects, including 10 and 11, and it's worth calling out on its own because it's the most repeatable, mission-friendly power in the series. When Brenner stands behind a plate of glass and asks 10 what is happening in another room, the boy doesn't need to guess. He sees with unsuspected eyes. Remote viewing collapses a wall into a window. When a city, a bunker, or an entire dimension sits between a subject and a target, the ability still renders clear impressions, so long as the viewer can lock onto a person, a place, or a strong enough signal. It works because it's built on attention, not proximity, which is why training emphasized calm and focus over adrenaline. That difference is also why remote viewing pairs so well with projection. One power finds, the other intervenes, making for a potentially deadly and highly efficient combo. This is used tactically in the new season when 11 enters the mind of Sergeant Akers. She navigates his memories to find out where Dr. K is hiding, and discovers a locked vault door in his mind that he is trying to protect. She physically rips this mental door open to discover the truth, that the military has captured someone powerful. The Mind Flayer's hive mind is the series' largest power by sheer scale, and it reframes every other ability by changing what one action does to many bodies at once. The entity coordinates creatures across miles, shares information instantly, and punishes weaknesses everywhere when even just one node is wounded. Strike demodogs in a Siberian prison, and flying predators in Indiana falter. Burn a proxy body in a steelworks, and human hosts feel the backlash. The hive mind also handles possession, spreading through organisms like a system update and rewriting priorities until individuality collapses. That link is why radios spike, lights flicker, and temperatures fall before an attack. It isn't just a monster in a room, it's a network waking up and preparing for a huge assault. Will Byers' connection to this hive mind is the central plot driver of Season 5. He describes the connection as a movie you can't turn off. When the Demogorgon attacks the barn, Will feels its rage and its pain when Joyce hits it with an axe. He is inhabiting it. This connection allows the group to track the monsters using Will as a living compass. A step beyond coordination, the Mind Flayer also demonstrates weather influence and environmental pressure, pushing storm systems and static that mirror its moods and amplify dread. It's both resilient in form and adaptable in strategy, capable of moving fast via the network of tunnels and vectors it controls, and able to negate the usefulness of certain powers by overwhelming the body or the channel. When a human army isn't enough, it'll make one by melting rats and people into flesh for a larger vessel, or by co-opting a strong host for tactical speed rather than biomass expansion. The point is always reach and control. Every power it uses is a method to erase distance between itself and its goal and to make the opponent's choices as narrow as possible. Vecna's curse combines psychic violence with a polished method. First, the target is isolated by visions that pry into private guilt, showing clocks that shouldn't chime, spiders that shouldn't swarm, or memories that have been carefully shelved out of sight. The visions are never random. They're tailored to shatter composure and wear down defenses. When the barrier finally collapses, the body lifts, the bones twist, and the eyes are destroyed. The method binds across distance. A boy at a lake rises without a hand ever touching him because the real battle is inside his mind. And electrical surges and flashlights miles away mark where the attacker's body is anchored. The curse feeds the power that opens gates, and each kill tears open one more door between worlds. This curse has evolved. Vecna is no longer just breaking bones. He is capturing minds to build a new world. We see this in the way he abducts Holly and the other children, intending to use them as vessels because they are malleable. He tells Eleven that he wants to reshape the world into something predator-dominant, showing her visions of the massacre at Hawkins' lab and creating the Mind Flayer shape because he saw it in a drawing by Will Byers. Memory intrusion sits at the heart of Vecna's broader power set. Before the killings escalate, Henry Creel experiments on the smallest scale by making a parent relive wartime crimes or by reaching into animals to test thresholds of control. That habit soon becomes a horrible strategy. He constructs mental rooms, rewrites what victims believe they're seeing, and then forces them to return to moments they cannot endure. It's an invasive edit of what the brain is processing, spliced together with a subject's worst internal footage of their life. By the time he's fully transformed, the mind he inhabits is a crimson, spired domain with rules he sets, which is why confronting him there requires an equal and opposite act of projection and force. We see Eleven weaponize memory intrusion against Sullivan in the new season. Hopper holds Sullivan captive in the Upside Down, and Eleven brutally digs through his mind to find the location of Dr. K. She forces him to relive the moment he was given an ultimatum by the doctor, literally blasting open a mental door that Sullivan tries to keep shut. Gate creation by murder is the other half of Vecna's design. The series ties each kill to a new tear, and then shows 4 tiers converging into a town-rending catastrophe. That escalates gatework from a rare accident or a carefully targeted tool to a deliberate war plan. He doesn't need machines or a lab. He needs victims synchronized to a pattern he defines, a body tied to the house where vines can suspend him, and an unbroken chain of concentration that allies work to disrupt from multiple fronts. This is where projection meets shotguns and Molotovs. The crew has to hit the body and the mind at the same time, because every second the ritual continues carves reality into a shape the enemy wants. The Demogorgon's power profile blends biology with a surprising touch of psychics. At full size, it tears through steel doors, sees in the dark, and hunts by scent and the hint of blood and water. In episode 2K of season 5, we see just how physically terrifying this creature is when it drops through the ceiling of Holly's room. It survives being stabbed in the face with a broken wine bottle by Karen Wheeler and taking a golf club to the shoulder from Ted. What makes it special in the power catalog is its ability to tear open temporary rifts and, in at least one case, use limited telekinetic effects. The creature crosses distance by literally making its own doorways, then drags victims through to a waiting nest. The show is careful with the powers here, treating gate creation by the creature as a repeatable hunting adaptation, not a huge dimensional rewrite. It's the Predator's way of stepping between rooms, and it's why barricades that stop a person can't stop the Demogorgon. The same ability appears partially workable for adolescents, with the Demodog stage retaining strength, durability, and the capacity to tunnel and swarm on command. Demobats demonstrate the lighter, faster side of the hive. They fly, which makes them the only common airborne component of the entity fields, and they carry a tail adapted to bind and strangle rather than simply slash at their enemies. Their most important trait isn't damage and ability to kill, but instead how they act as eyes and ears. Stationary, they're hard to spot, and in motion they canvas large spaces that grounded hunters can't reach, relaying threat and target information to the network instantly. In a fight, they overwhelm by numbers and angles, and outside a fight, they make a ceiling track as dangerous as a hallway. The flayed represent possession as a power with two paths. On one path, the entity hollows out a host's will and uses the body to recruit others, maintain cover, and carry out precise tasks like cutting power or luring prey. On the other path, the flesh is only temporary. It dissolves into biomass that joins a larger proxy creature, trading subtlety for mass. The show highlights the cost to individuality either way. Speech slurs into chorus. Preferences vanish. Pain becomes a group signal. A host with strong ties can sometimes resist for seconds at a time, but the baseline is obedience. It's a power that looks like strength from the outside and feels like erasure from within. Billy's case shows that possession can grant a kind of temporary enhancement rather than total dissolution. While acting as the prime human host, he shows speed, force, and resilience beyond normal human limits, a practical upgrade that lets the entity move through human spaces without always revealing a monster's outline. Yet, the enhancement carries a second edge. Memories remain accessible, and loved ones can reach what is left of the person long enough to disrupt commands. The ability is terrifying because it weaponizes a familiar face, but the story also uses it to show that power built on constant coercion is easy to break around the edges. One clear memory can break it long enough to change the future. A lingering psychic link defines Will's abilities after his dramatic rescue. He senses the entity's presence like pressure at the base of the neck or a sudden chill through a room, and he can sometimes feel where attention is focused, even when the others can't see or feel a thing. That connection isn't a superpower in the flashy sense, but it's often the earliest warning system the group has. It's also a liability, though, because the link can cut both ways. When the enemy watches through the same thread, plans turn into bait. This leads Zul to the most shocking evolution of power in the entire series so far. At the end of episode 4, Will controls the Demogorgons. As Vecna retreats to the Upside Down, several Demogorgons charge at Robin, Lucas, and Mike. Inspired by Robin's speech about accepting her true self and finding the answers within, Will taps into his connection. His eyes roll back, turning white like Vecna's. He holds out his hand, and the Demogorgons freeze in midair. He then telekinetically snaps their limbs and contorts their bodies, killing them instantly. This confirms that Will has leveled up and unlocked powers that mirror Vecna's own. The show takes care to portray the link as real and specific, not a simple hunch, tying it to maps, drawings, and synchronized reactions to cold and noise. The Void's mechanics deserve their own place in this list because the Void isn't an accessory. It's a shared tool for multiple psychic acts. It's a state, accessed through sensory deprivation or static, where a subject's mind reduces the universe to signal and target. Inside it, remote viewing becomes normal, projection becomes possible, and memory traversal can be attempted. The interesting limit is that the Void still obeys inference. If a subject only knows part of a person's situation, the Void renders what the mind can reach, not necessarily a comprehensive truth. That's why names, faces, and even objects connected to a person help aim the experience. The Void is the stage on which the most important acts of seeing, entering, and intervening happen. Power suppression is the quiet counterpart to all this, and understanding it clarifies why some events happen when they do. The Soteria implant neutralizes a subject's abilities until it's removed, which means psychic strength isn't purely internal. It can be capped by a device, reawakened when the cap is gone, and exploited by anyone who knows that switch exists. The moment that suppression fails, a dormant arsenal returns at full strength, and the show treats that reversal as an immediate danger to everyone nearby. That isn't only a plot turn, but also a hard rule. Abilities in this world can be muffled by design. not just weakened by exhaustion and overuse. We see this used on a massive scale at the Mach Z. 11 is captured and placed in a room with a collar on her neck that dampens her powers. She tries to use her telekinesis to save Hopper from a tentacle creature, but her hand shakes violently, her nose bleeds, and nothing happens. It forces her to physically attack Dr. K instead, showing that technology has finally caught up to psychic ability. There's also evidence that at least some of these abilities have a hereditary or exposure-linked component. 11's mother, Terry Ives, shows some limited forms of psychic activity, even in a diminished state. And the series frames 11's baseline as something she is born with and then trained to use, not simply engineered after birth. That meshes with the lab's broader program, where multiple children manifest telekinesis as a common core and carry unique second talents like illusions or remote viewing layered on top. The pattern implies a seed and a scaffold. The seed sets potential, and the scaffold of drugs, deprivation, and practice grows it into something repeatable on command. Finally, scale defines how these powers interact across the board. A single person focuses and projects. A predator tears a hole big enough for a hunt. A hive maps an entire town into a nervous system that moves at one speed. That's why victories arrive in coordinated waves. Burn a nest in Kamchatka to numb bats over Hawkins. Close a gate in a lab to starve the tunnels under a pumpkin patch. Restart a heart in the real world while pinning a monster in a mind it believes it owns. Every power here is at its most interesting when it meets another power, because that's where rules emerge. Exceptions are tested, and the series shows how thought, distance, and biology weave together into one system that rewards focus and punishes noise. The video isn't complete without acknowledging that some abilities evolve by use. Remote viewing expands into projection. Projection becomes combat at a distance. Telekinesis starts with cans and grows into gates. Even the enemy discovers new pathways, drawing power from a bite that changes what can be influenced across dimensions, and learning to turn a personal ritual into a continental threat. Nothing stands still. What began as experiments in a basement with a blindfold and a white noise machine becomes a battlefield where minds meet in constructed spaces, and the fate of a town depends on which focus breaks first. The rule that holds all of it together never changes. Thoughts, fears, and memories aren't side details, they're the main event. Every victory is proof that, in this world, the sharpest weapon isn't a blade or a bullet. It's the ability to decide what a mind can reach, what a world can open, and who gets to walk back through the door. Which power from the show is your favorite? Are there any you're hoping to see evolve? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more Stranger Things content and theories, click the video on screen now.